3 bone-chilling true trespassing horror stories that will haunt you forever. The wind howled like a pack of hungry wolves that night. In a forgotten corner of the world, an abandoned house stood at the end of a long, twisted dirt road. It was the kind of place that sent shivers down your spine and whispered secrets to those brave enough to listen. Local kids spun tales about its dark history, ghostly figures flickering in the windows and a chilling laughter echoing through forest shadows. But what lay within those walls was far scarier than any ghost story. What truly set this house apart were the strange markings around its doors. Neighbors claimed they were symbols from an ancient language, etched into the wood by something not quite human. Each night, the markings seemed to pulse as if alive, drawing unwelcome visitors closer. One daring soul decided to test the truth behind the legends. Armed with nothing but a flashlight and a heart full of bravado, they crossed the threshold. The air felt thick, almost electric, crackling with anticipation, and they could swear they heard a distant whisper calling their name. As the eerie silence enveloped them, powerful emotions surged through their chest, a blend of excitement and sheer terror. They could feel an unexplainable presence, tightening their throat and raising the hairs on the back of their neck. Every creak of the floorboards echoed louder in the darkness, making their heart race faster. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream sliced through the air from one of the upper rooms, halting their breath. It was the unmistakable sound of pure fear. But was it real? Or just another tale spun by the brave and foolish? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads-up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. With renewed determination, the brave adventurer ascended the staircase, each step a deliberate choice. What awaited them above? A shudder ran through them as the door to the room creaked open in response to their presence, revealing nothing but darkness and dust. Their heartbeat thudded in their ears, drowning out the heavy silence. But something stirred in the shadows. A figure darted past, leaving a gust of cold air in its wake. The figure was gone in an instant, lost in the dense fog of the room. Fear took hold, squeezing their lungs. Was it their imagination? Or was there truly someone alive in this forsaken place? With every fiber of their being urging them to flee, they were caught in a desperate grip of curiosity, standing at the precipice of fear and intrigue. What threads of horror would unravel next? What stories wanted to be told? The darkness was suffocating, like a heavy blanket that smothered sound and light. They took a tentative step inside the room, the floor creaking under their weight as if warning them to turn back. Heart pounding, they raised the flashlight, its beam slicing through the thick shadows. At first, there was nothing but peeling wallpaper and dust motes dancing in the air. But as they scanned the corners, their breath caught in their throat. There were marks on the wall that looked disturbingly like hands, splayed and clawing as if someone had tried to escape. The thought sent chills racing down their spine. "Hello?" they called out, their voice trembling. Silence was the only reply. But then, just beyond the rustle of their own heartbeat, came a soft murmur, almost like a whisper. It felt like fingers curling around their mind, tugging them further into the depths of the house. They strained to hear, hoping for a response. Then, a sudden crash echoed from the end of the hallway behind them. Adrenaline surged through their veins. Heart racing, they spun around, flashlight beam darting wildly. Shadows flickered against the walls, tricking their senses, but they willed themselves to stand firm, to confront whatever haunted this place. "You're not real," they muttered to themselves. But doubt gnawed at them. What if they weren't alone? The stories came rushing back to haunt their thoughts: ghostly figures, ancient curses, a spirit filled with rage. It was all too easy to get lost in the creepy folklore, an enticing trap luring them deeper into the web of fear. Stepping cautiously from the room, they ventured forth, compelled by a force they couldn't explain. The hallway stretched infinitely ahead, steeped in darkness. With each faltering step, the fear intensified, clawing at their chest. As they approached the door at the end, seemingly untouched by time, a dreadful feeling settled in. They hesitated, feeling the air grow heavy, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Then came the heart-stopping sound, a whisper, low and seductive. "Come closer." The voice vibrated through the air, rolling over their skin like a cold wave. "Who's there?" Panic bubbled inside, threatening to spill out. What if this was the point of no return? But curiosity, that dangerous impulse, outweighed their fear. Hand trembling, they reached for the door handle. The moment their fingers grazed its surface, the temperature in the hallway plummeted. Their breath came out in visible puffs, the sudden shock making raw terror spike once more. Just as they turned the handle, silence fell, thick like a curtain in front of their face. They flung the door open, light flooding the passage behind them, illuminating an empty room with walls that pulsed like a living thing. What lay inside was a mirror, but not a reflection. It was something darker, deeper, alive with a swirling energy that pulled on their very senses. There, among the kaleidoscope of shifting shadows, a face appeared, a sinister grin that sent ice coursing through their veins. It looked familiar, yet utterly malevolent, and then, the mirror cracked, crisp lines splintered outward, echoing like breaking glass in a deafening silence. A crack that felt like doom itself, shattering the barriers between realities. The breath caught in their throat, unable to scream, unable to move. What had they unleashed? As the glass fell away, so too did the illusion of safety, allowing shadows to spill forth like dark ink. They realized with horror that something was emerging from the depths, stretching its limbs, unfurling with wicked intent. What had they awakened? The question throbbed in their mind, and just as panic gripped their heart, a sudden darkness engulfed them, and everything went black. All that remained was an echoing whisper, soft yet ominous. "You shouldn't have come here." Was this truly the end, or just the beginning of something far worse? A cold shiver ran through their body, as if ice water had been poured directly into their veins. The air was thick with an oppressive weight, a malignant presence clawing at their mind. They fought against the pressure, pushing back against the darkness that sought to envelop them. Suddenly, a sharp grasp tugged at their collar, pulling them backward. It felt like fingers, cold and skeletal, clutching at fabric. Panic flooded their system. They whipped around, ready to confront whatever nightmare had emerged, but all they saw were shadows flickering against the walls. Had it been a trick of the mind? Their heart raced, thudding against their chest with a tempo of impending doom. "Is anyone there?" The question came, more fearful than confident. Silence swallowed their voice, amplifying the sense of isolation. They stood rooted to the spot, hands trembling. Beneath the unsettling quiet, a low growl rumbled, vibrating through the floor and into their bones. It was a sound that dripped with malice, sending their pulse hammering. They backed away from the mirror, its cracked surface still alive with swirling shadows, squeezing their eyes shut for a moment. "Wake up, wake up!" They urged themselves, but the reality felt all too solid. When they opened their eyes, the figure in the mirror grinned wider, teeth glinting unnaturally against the dark. Then, in the blink of an eye, the air shifted, the whispers grew louder, swirling around them like an angry storm. "Join us," the voices beckoned, seductive yet sinister, echoing through the empty space like fallen prayers. They were drowning in an ocean of dread, the edges of their vision blurring, losing touch with reality. Without thinking, they turned and bolted down the hallway, heart thumping in sync with the echoing footsteps behind. Each thud echoed a reminder something was chasing them. Something that belonged to the dark. As they sprinted, shadows crept closer, creeping along the walls, reaching out as if to drag them down into whatever hell this cursed place held. They dared a glance back, terror stealing their breath. The empty doorway blurred in the dim light, and they could see shapes flitting, pulsing shadows that writhed and twisted like they breathed. "God, no!" They gasped, feeling a surge of strength course through them. They raced forward, desperate to escape the vortex of despair, the oppressive weight of fear pressing down on their shoulders. The whispers turned to screams, a cacophony of sound that threatened to overpower them. Just when they thought they could escape, the floor trembled beneath their feet, and the walls began to close in like a noose. They barreled forward, lungs burning, ready to burst. A glimmer of light flickered in the distance, a small beacon of hope. Please, please. They pushed harder, losing themselves in that small light. As they reached the doorway, something cold gripped their ankle, pulling them down. They stumbled, flailing wildly as the darkness encroached. Their fingers scraped against the wooden floor, scrambling for purchase. In a last-ditch effort, they kicked free, collapsing through the entrance. They barreled headfirst into the adjacent room, gasping for breath. But there was no respite. Looking back, the room was alive with movement, shadows swirling, growing limbs that reached out of the darkness. Then something unexpected happened. A bright light surged forth, illuminating the haunting landscape. The shadows recoiled, hissing like a wounded animal. It was then they realized it wasn't just a light. It was a portal, and something was about to step through. What had they disturbed? What sinister force was waiting on the other side? And before fear could settle in, a chilling laugh resonated through the air, crisp and victorious, echoing the promise of unspeakable horrors yet to unfold. The portal flickered and pulsed, its luminescence growing stronger with each heartbeat. With every throb of the light, the shadows shrieked and recoiled deeper into the corners of the room, their twisted forms writhing in agony at the sight of what was emerging. Fear tightened around their chest like a vice, making it hard to breathe or think. A figure began to materialize, stepping through the radiant threshold. It was tall, draped in tattered robes that whispered against the air. The face slowly came into view, features obscured by a heavy hood. But, even in darkness, the glint of eyes sharper than daggers shone forth. The being exuded an air of ancient power, dark and compelling, drawing them in with its hidden promises. "Do you dare to come closer?" The figure intoned, voice smooth like silk and heavy with an unsettling charm. Heart racing, they took a cautious step back. "What are you?" The question trembled through their lips, a poor defense against the rising fear. "An opportunity," it replied, the hint of a grin barely visible under the shadow, to embrace the empty. Panic clawed at them. This was no opportunity, it was a trap, an irresistible temptation bound to soul-crushing despair. They could feel that darkness around them crackling in anticipation, sensing their fear the way a predator senses blood in the water. "Stay back!" they shouted, taking another step backward. The room swirled as if the very air was alive, tendrils of darkness creeping closer, seeking to wrap around their ankles and pull them under once more. Suddenly, an echoing roar erupted from just outside the doorway, drowning out the whispers of the shadows. In an instant, the door slammed shut, reverberating with a ferocity that shook the floor beneath them. Their heart leaped into their throat. "Fool! You think you can escape?" The being mocked, its voice rising over the tumult. "You're already chained here. Why not surrender to the emptiness?" With determination surging through their veins, they spun toward the portal. If it had power enough to banish the shadows, maybe it could also lead them to safety. They braced themselves, dodging the grasping limbs, trying to reach for that mesmerizing light. But as they stepped toward the portal, the figure laughed again, a chilling sound that prickled their skin. "We shall see if the light is your salvation or your doom." In an unexpected rush, the shadows lunged at them, bearing down like a wave, drowning out the light and choking any remaining hope. They thrashed and fought, desperate to break free from the clutches that threatened to pull them back into the depths of fear. As everything around them erupted into chaos, one thought flashed through their mind: they had to escape, no matter the cost. In an act of sheer defiance, guided by instinct, they lunged into the portal. A jolt took hold as they plunged into the brilliant light, body tumbling through a kaleidoscope of confusion. Time felt suspended, the darkness and chaos fading into distant echoes. Just as quickly as it had begun, the journey ended. They landed on solid ground. The light dimmed, revealing a room steeped in silence. It was entirely different from the horrors they had fled, stark and empty. The air felt still, almost too calm, but an unsettling realization washed over them. There was no exit in sight. Glancing around, they swallowed hard, heart racing once more. What lay ahead? Were they safe, or had they merely traded one nightmare for another? As the shadows began to flicker at the edges, a familiar voice whispered from the depths of their memory, "Join us." It chilled their bones, pulling them back toward the ever-encroaching darkness that still sought to claim them. Despair clawed at their insides, forcing them to confront a dreadful choice. Would surrender lead to solace or endless torment? The silence closed in around them, thicker than the shadows that had pursued them. Each breath echoed in the emptiness as they stood frozen, pulse pounding with the rhythm of uncertainty. The air in the room felt alive, charged with unseen energy, yet it was also cold, heavy with the weight of something ancient. "Where am I?" The words escaped their lips, trembling like a lost child calling for a parent. They strained their eyes against the dim light, searching for any sign of comfort, any source of warmth. But all that greeted them were stark, barren walls that seemed to close in tighter, suffocating in their stillness. The whisper returned, slithering into their mind. "Join us." It felt like a siren-esque call, luring them towards temptation. Just as they turned to dismiss the thought, the room quaked, a low rumble vibrating through the floor. Shadows crept closer, curling menacingly at the edges of their vision, flickers of movement in their periphery. "Get out!" They shouted into the void, a desperate plea for liberation. In response, laughter erupted from the darkness, a haunting cacophony that clawed at their sanity. The sound was familiar yet foreign, twisting into something grotesque that felt like betrayal. Searching for a way out, they recalled the portal's blinding light. There must be a pathway, a crack, something they could exploit. They stepped forward, scanning the room for signs: a door, a window, anything that could guide them away from this encroaching doom. With each passing moment, the whispers grew louder, insistent, drowning their thoughts. Images flashed in their mind of dark figures, spectral hands reaching out, enticing them to embrace the cold and silence. "Why do you resist?" A voice broke in, silky and drenched in malice. "You belong here." "No!" They screamed, the word ricocheting against the walls, desperate and raw. "You won't take me." And with that defiance, they bolted. They ran headlong into the dark, eyes wide, scanning for a glimmer of light, anything to guide their panic-stricken heartbeat. They rounded what seemed to be a column or some structure in the center of the room. Shrouded in shadow, it pulsed subtly, almost like it was alive. As they neared, an odd compulsion pulled at them, like a tether binding them to a colossal secret. Goosebumps raced up their arms. It was both terrifying and strangely comforting. The whispers intensified, morphing into words that clawed at their consciousness. "Do you really think you can escape?" They halted, breathless, terror gripping them like a vice. "You don't understand. This is where the lost find purpose." Heart racing, they grasped the edge of the structure, fully revealing it for the first time. It was a mirror, dark and reflective, but the surface rippled as though it were water. They glanced into it, gasping at the sight of what? Reflections of faces, twisted with anguish and joy, fractured versions of themselves and others bound by sorrow. The mirror showed them what they had lost, what they could still lose. In that moment, clarity struck like lightning. This place was a crossroads, a threshold not just physically but of the spirit. They were being offered a choice, to surrender to despair or fight with every fiber of their being. The shadows surged, reaching as they screamed, "I choose life." A burst of energy ignited within, a fierce determination rising like fire through ice. They spun away from the mirror, pushing against the grasping darkness. But just then, from behind, a voice laughed, a voice that sounded eerily like their own. "You'll come back. They always do." Hope flickered, but uncertainty stormed in again. What did it mean? Would they ever truly escape, as they raced toward what they hoped was freedom, an ominous shape loomed behind them, a promise of return wrapped in despair. Ahead, a door appeared, dull yet inexplicably compelling. Would it lead them to the light or deeper into the shadows? Could they find their way out, or would they be forever bound to the darkness that lurked within? The door loomed ahead, its surface scratched and pitted like it had weathered storms of forgotten time. Every instinct screamed for them to rush forward, but a chilling uncertainty gripped them. Just like the mirror had shown them, the path they chose might unravel even deeper nightmares. As they approached, a heavy hum resonated from the door, vibrating against their chest. It felt as if it were alive, as anxious for release as they were. They hesitated, hand poised over the rusted handle, breath hitching in their throat. What awaited them on the other side? A sliver of light peeked through the cracks, almost inviting, but shadowy fingers caressed the edges, warning them to stay. Go back, the whisper returned, gentler now, echoing through their mind like a memory from a dream. This is not your place. Panic surged, anchoring them in place. They could hear their own heartbeat, loud and desperate. They'll come for you. They will always come for you. Gritting their teeth, they summoned every ounce of courage. With a swift motion, they turned the handle and pushed the door open. A blinding brightness washed over them, and for a fleeting second, hope surged with a warmth they hadn't felt in ages. But the moment they crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind them with a deafening bang, the echo reverberating like the finality of a judgment. They stumbled into a hallway that stretched endlessly, the walls lined with old photographs that seemed to watch with hollowed eyes, memories trapped in frames. Each step echoed, bobbing off the whispered voices, now mingling with the scratched, melodic crackle of distant laughter. Were they truly in another realm, or had they stumbled into their worst nightmare? Shadows danced along the walls, waving as if beckoning them further. Their instincts screamed to turn back, but there was a strange pull, an undeniable urge to move onward. They felt drawn to a door at the end of the hall adorned with intricate carvings, patterns that twisted and turned like a serpent. As they reached the door, dread folded over them like a heavy blanket. A name etched in the wood caught their eye, Elysium. The word reverberated in their mind, a siren call echoing promises of salvation. This had to be it. Surely, this was the way out. But a chill raced down their spine as an inner voice warned, Elysium is a deception. Heart thudding, they placed a trembling hand on the door. Would this final threshold lead to safety or further destruction? Suddenly, the whispers crescendoed, a jarring chorus of unearthly voices clamoring for attention. Open it. Embrace your fate. They could feel each word crawling under their skin, electrifying their nerves, gulping down fear. They pulled the door open, but what lay beyond was not a sanctuary. It was a room filled with reflections of their own fears, insecurities, and losses, each one an echo of what they had tried to escape. So many eyes stared back, judgment seeping from them like oil. Welcome back, the shadows whispered gleefully, wrapping them in licentious satin. Panic surged anew, a desperate gasp. Were they trapped again? Were they bound to these memories forever? Leave now, while you can. They screamed, but only silence responded. Shadows surged from the corners, reaching for them, wrapping around their legs, dragging them backward. Nowhere to hide, a voice cooed from the depths of darkness, deep and resonant. Join us in the shadows. Surrender is your only escape. A single flickering light bulb buzzed erratically above, casting uncanny shadows that danced wildly. The whispers grew louder, swirling around like a tempest. They had to move. With renewed desperation, they tore themselves from the grips of the memories, racing back down the hall, propelled by the need to escape. They slammed through the door they had entered, the one with the pitted handle. But what awaited them in the sanctuary they thought they had found? Right ahead loomed another door, identical to the first. Would this lead them to freedom, or was it just another trap, designed to ensnare them once again? The darkness behind them chased relentlessly, seeking to claim what was once lost. Their breath fogged the air as they readied to turn the handle. What awaited them beyond this threshold? They stood there, frozen, heart racing, staring at the identical door. The polished brass handle glinted under the flickering bulb above, teasing them with its promise. But deep down, they knew this place thrived on deception. Each decision felt heavy. Turn the handle and risk whatever lay beyond? Or remain forever a prisoner of the shadows? Gritting their teeth, they reminded themselves that fear couldn't be the compass. They took a step toward the door, feeling the cool air pulse around them like the tide pulling away from the shore. The shadows whispered again, a chilling lullaby promising safety, but beneath the soothing tone lingered a threat. You're too late. They're already here. With trembling fingers, they grasped the door handle. A lurch of dread coursed through them. As they twisted it, the door opened with a slow creak, revealing a narrow room lined with cold stone. The air was thick, damp like the breath of the earth itself, suffocating and stale. The walls pulsated with an eerie glow, casting distorted figures that seemed to dance just beyond sight. There was no escape, only the remnants of what used to be. A single bare bulb dangled above, swinging slightly, sending shards of light across the cold stone floor. Inside, a large mirror stood against the far wall, its glass peculiar and distorted. They approached it cautiously, drawn in by a grotesque fascination. What they saw sent panic slamming through them. Reflections spun wildly, showing not just their own image but another version of themselves, darker, hollow-eyed. It grinned back at them, and suddenly, the smile felt malicious. Join us, it beckoned, voice oozing from its crooked lips. You belong to us now. You can't run. You can't hide. Their breath caught in their throat. This wasn't a mere reflection. It was a gateway, promising to reveal secrets best left buried. The shadows surrounding them writhed in excitement, hungry for the fear that radiated from their very core. They could sense it, the urge to slip into that world of darkness. Unspeakable power lay just beyond their reach, but at what cost? No. I want tea. They shouted, taking a step back, heart pounding painfully against their ribs. They turned to flee, but the door slammed shut, sealing them inside. Panic clawed at their mind, the raw need for escape flooding over them. Surrender. You've already chosen. The voices echoed, enveloping them, drowning out reason. The shadows expanded, narrowing their space, swallowing any semblance of security. Their skin prickled as the breath of the dark closed in, whispering secrets they were never meant to hear. In a last desperate burst of willpower, they hurled themselves at the mirror. The reflection rippled, and they felt a force pulling them forward into that hellish realm. With a scream ripped from their lungs, they leapt, plunging toward the glass. But just before impact, the world shifted. The mirror shattered, and the shards exploded outward, each piece a glimpse into what might have been. They tumbled through, suddenly in a different place entirely. Where were they now? Shadows loomed large, but this time, amidst the darkness, a figure emerged, a figure with familiar features, one they hadn't seen in years. Help me, it whispered, voice a ghostly echo. Before they could respond, the walls began to close in again, every surface slick with darkness. Would they rush to the figure's aid, or would they finally succumb to the whispers? The darkness threatened to consume them once more, pulling at their feet, keeping them stuck in fear. What would be their next move? Would they free this lost soul, or be swept into the shadows forever? Each choice they made now mattered more than ever, leading closer to something they couldn't afford to ignore. The heart of the nightmare beckoned, but the truth loomed even bigger ahead. What if this was all just the beginning? The figure in the shadow was almost a phantom, flickering like a candle in the wind. It was hard to breathe. Each gasping inhale pulled heavier air into their lungs, the dank, suffocating smell of fear wrapping around them like a shroud. Please, the figure urged, its voice wrapped in desperation. Each plea twisted the knot in their gut tighter until it felt like they were being choked by unseen hands. But who was it? Was this truly someone they once knew? The dim light made it hard to discern details as the walls continued to press in, compacting the only way in or out. With every passing moment, the darkness churned around them, a thick, tangible haze that dripped with unsettling energy. "Don't listen to it," a voice from the shadows shrieked. "It's a trick. You'll lose yourself." Heart racing, they swiveled to see who had spoken. But all they found were echoes of shadows slithering away into the depths. Panic surged again. They turned back to the figure. "What do you want?" Anxiety coursed through every word. "Help me escape," it repeated, but there was a hollow tone beneath. A chilling sense of familiarity washed over them. Something deep within told them to trust no one not here. They felt a magnetic pull towards the figure, yet reason screamed that they might be walking into a trap. If they reached for the figure, would they succumb to the shadows, losing themselves forever? "Do you even know who I am?" They ventured, testing the connection, trying to decorate the fog with familiarity. The figure faltered, and for a split second, doubt flitted across its face. "You know me, remember?" Because they didn't. The fading memories taunted them like wisps of smoke. Something long buried, covered by time and pain, clawed its way to the surface. Suddenly, the walls jerked violently, and the darkness roared, drowning out their thoughts. The air shifted and crackled with energy. The shadows were agitated. I need to know," they said, desperation creeping into their tone. "What happened to you?" The figure stepped closer, and with every inch, the smell of decay intensified. Eyes sinking deeper, it rasped, "I'm trapped here because of you. You left me." Shock shot through them like ice, freezing their thoughts. The weight of realization settled over them like a final judgment. This wasn't about helping someone who needed them, it was about confronting a truth they had hidden away. Just as they opened their mouth to respond, a deafening crash sounded behind them. The door they had entered through splintered, jagged edges appearing as it was flung open by unseen forces. The shadows shrieked, a cacophony of lost souls wailing in satisfaction. Voices tangled in a frenzy around them, relentless and overwhelming. "Choose. Choose now." Ignoring the instinct to retreat, they felt a different kind of courage swell within. "I won't abandon you. I'll break this curse." As the darkness threatened to swallow them both, they lunged forward, reaching out to grasp the figure's outstretched hand. But suddenly, it twisted, morphing into something grotesque and monstrous. Its eyes gleamed, revealing depths of malice that left them breathless. "No!" they shouted, tearing their gaze away, stumbling backward. The mirror was still shattering. "You won't take me." Desperate, they whirled back to face the crumbling reflections of themselves, fragments swirling around like a storm. Would their next move lead them to freedom or take them further into despair? A cold laugh echoed, chilling them to the bone as they felt the figure grasp at their own fears, pulling at every doubt they clung to. In that moment, with shadows closing in, they knew the choice was cruelly theirs to make. Would they dare to dive deeper, risking everything for the truth, or would they retreat into familiar darkness to save themselves? Everything hinged on their next heartbeat. The moment felt suspended, a heartbeat caught in time. Shadows draped like an oppressive blanket, stifling their senses. They stumbled back, adrenaline coursing through their veins. The grotesque figure twisted into something so wrong it made their skin crawl. Within the dark depths of its eyes, they saw reflected not just fear but betrayal, a mirror of their own guilty conscience. "Choose." The phantom hissed, its words slithering into their ears. "Choose or be consumed." Panic crashed over them like a wave. They resisted the urge to flee, grounding themselves in that swirling chaos. Memories sputtered to life, broken images of laughter that echoed now as hollow echoes in this damp prison. Who had they left behind? Was this a lover? A friend? The answers slipped away like sand through fingers. Enough! They shouted into the darkness, internal resolve shattering the haze of despair. As if stirred by their defiance, the shadows recoiled slightly, revealing glimpses of the space around them, a warped reality shimmering into view. With jagged breaths, they spun again, gripping the fabric of their memories tighter, willing the truth to emerge. Shadows still clawed at the edges of their mind, but they could almost hear the faint echoes of answers, laughter, cries, the heartbeat of someone they had abandoned. "Help me!" The figure howled once more, but this time it felt different. Desperate and distorted, but laced with something else. Regret? Or was it something darker? "Who am I? Who are you?" Their voice cracked, desperation mingling with determination. The walls quivered, responding almost eagerly to the challenge, the energy thickening, pressure mounting. "You're the one who walked away." It surged forward, the grotesque form twisting and writhing, an entity fueled by rage and longing. "You left me to rot in this darkness." "No!" they cried, eyes frantically scanning their surroundings. The glimpses of past selves twisted and contorted around them, mocking, just out of reach. They could feel the weight of the truth tugging at their heart, threatening to drag them under. But then a sliver of light broke through, flickering just beyond the edge of the shadows. It bathed the air in warmth, a beacon of hope amid despair. "I can't turn back," they murmured, the realization tightening their chest. "But I can move forward." As they turned toward the light, they felt the figure lash out. "You think you can escape? That light is a lie." The shrieks of the shadows crescendoed, drowning out the figure's taunts. With every ounce of strength, they pressed on toward the radiance, the darkness behind them writhing in fury. In a stunning moment of clarity, they realized the shadows were fueled by their fears. With trembling hands, they reached toward the light. It pulsed with warmth, coaxing them forward. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." The darkness shrieked in an agonizing wail, a sound that echoed through the confines of their mind. The figure contorted, its malice and sorrow intermingling in a chaotic dance of despair. "Choose the light. Choose me." The essence of that haunting connection threatened to pull them back, but they pressed on each step, a defiance against the oppressive force that sought to entrap them. "I choose to remember. Not to be shackled by the past." As they stepped into the light, a violent surge of energy exploded around them. The walls trembled, shadows clawing desperately as they felt the shackles of their own memories begin to shake loose. But just as that moment of liberation flickered into view, a deafening crack disrupted the calm. The very fabric of reality seemed to shatter. "Stay with me." The figure howled, a plea now tinged with desperation and fear. Would they truly break free, or would they forever remain linked to the darkness? The answer lingered just out of reach, waiting for the next heartbeat, the next decision. With a burst of determination, they plunged into the light, feeling warmth engulf them like a hug after a long, cold winter. The shadows screamed behind them, a cacophony of despair, but they felt their thrumming power fading as they surged forward. When they emerged, the silence was piercing, like a vacuum sucking away all the horror. They found themselves in an open field, bathed in the light of a golden sun that hung lazily in a flawless blue sky. The familiar sense of grass and wildflowers filled their lungs, grounding them in a reality that felt far too unreal. Heart pounding, they dropped to their knees, digits clawing at the earth beneath them. Tears streamed down their cheeks as a sense of relief flooded their being. "I did it," they whispered, a smile breaking through the weight of dread that had marred their spirit for so long. But as the clouds danced overhead, a nagging sense of loss clawed at them. They had left something behind, someone. What had happened to the figure? The grotesque reflection? The truths they had unearthed were raw, hinged on decisions they could no longer ignore. What if it wasn't done? A part of their mind whispered. A voice echoed, rich with the memories of pain. "You left me." That voice chased them through the golden field, mixing with the wind that whispered of unfinished business. And suddenly, it felt wrong to close the door on what had been. They were not free until they faced what lingered in that darkness. Gritting their teeth, they pulled themselves to their feet and turned back. The shadows followed, flickering at the edges of their vision, twisting into forms they had just escaped. They spotted it, that portal, pulsating with energy, much like before. With every instinct screaming for retreat, they pressed on, racing back into the fray. In an instant, they were swallowed by the dark. The familiar oppressive weight settled upon their chest as they stood at the threshold of the haunted house once more. The air hummed with energy, teeming with whispers that darted in and out of comprehension. "Help me!" The figure stood at the center of the room, this time not a twisted mockery, but a desperate friend. Without hesitating, they reached out. "I'm here," they called, "I won't leave you behind." The figure's form solidified, morphing from shadows into flesh, the haunting visage revealing an old friend, someone they had lost in their own battle with darkness. "Is it really you?" The breath caught in their throat as disbelief flared. "I've been trapped here, waiting for you," the friend replied, voice trembling. "All these years, please, help me." With shaking hands, they grasped their friend's, recalling the laughter once shared, the dreams that had burned bright before fear had chased them down. The power of union shattered the paralysis that bound them both, sending ripples through the darkness that threatened to ensnare them again. "No more fear!" they shouted, their voice igniting a strength deep within. It ricocheted off the walls, summoning forth a brilliant light that pushed against the encroaching shadows. Together they surged toward the mirror that had once taunted and tormented. "This ends now," they proclaimed in concert, their twin voices reverberating with confidence, illuminating the remnant shadows that twisted and recoiled, shrieking in pain. With newfound determination, they leaped toward the mirror, together, bracing for the surety of freedom. The surface rippled once again and exploded with blinding light, shattering the darkness into a million fragments that dissolved like smoke in the wind. Finally, they were released. The air felt fresher, cleaner, as they found themselves again standing together on the edge of that golden field. Hand in hand, they faced the horizon. The future stretched out ahead of them, alive with all the possibilities they might seize, free from the chains of that haunted house. They turned to each other, hearts lifted by the knowledge that they had emerged whole, bonded by the struggle against the darkness. Together, they would carve out a new existence far from the shadows. "Ready?" they asked, a glimmer of excitement shining in their eyes. "Ready," their friend echoed, the weight of the past finally lifting. As they stepped forward, laughter rang out across the field, mingling with the gentle breeze that welcomed them home. The shadows that once loomed had become distant echoes, unable to follow into the light they had chosen. They embraced that freedom, future unfolding in front of them, radiant and alive. And as the sun dipped beyond the horizon, the stars began to shine, each a reminder of the endless potential life held, free from fear's chains. Don't you ever forget, in the face of darkness, always choose light. You need to subscribe now, so you don't miss the next exclusive stories that will shake your world. Smash that like button to feed the algorithm, flood the comments section with your reactions and theories. Let us keep this conversation alive, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans understand how vital your support is for us.